They came from nowhere. No empire, no cities, no kings or castles, just endless plains, wild horses, and the sound of the wind cutting across the steppe. To the great civilizations of the 12th century, China, Persia, Europe, the Mongols were ghosts, nomads, barbarians, people without a history. No one feared them. Not yet. But then something happened on those frozen grasslands. From the heart of chaos, a leader rose, a man who would change the fate of half the planet. Temujin. He wasn't born into power. He was born into hunger. When his father was poisoned, his family was left to die. No tribe, no protection, just the cold and the wolves. And out there, between life and death, Temujin learned the one truth that would shape the world to come. He understood that to survive, he couldn't just fight men. He had to control their minds. And so he began uniting the tribes, not through peace, but through precision. One by one, he defeated his rivals. Those who resisted vanished. Those who obeyed became part of something far greater than themselves. When the tribes were finally united, he took a new name, Genghis Khan, universal ruler. To his followers, he was destiny itself. To the rest of the world, he was the storm they never saw coming. In less than 30 years, the Mongols would rise from dust and obscurity to create the largest empire in human history. They would cross deserts, mountains, and frozen rivers. They would burn cities older than memory. And they would leave behind a legacy so terrifying that centuries later people still whisper his name like a curse. This is the story of how a man with nothing built the most ruthless machine of conquest the world has ever seen. The story of Genghis Khan and the empire that taught humanity what happens when fear becomes law. The steppe was silent again, but it would never be the same. Because Genghis Khan didn't just unite the tribes, he transformed them. What was once chaos became a system, a machine built with one purpose, to conquer. He didn't care about noble blood or royal titles. What mattered was loyalty, discipline, and obedience. A peasant could become a general, but a traitor, even a noble one, was erased from existence. Every 10 men formed a unit, led by one trusted warrior. 10 units made 100. 10 hundreds made 1,000. 10,000s made an army. Simple, perfect, unbreakable. If one ran from battle, the other 9 were executed. Fear kept them alive. The Mongol soldier was more than a fighter. He was a living weapon. He trained from childhood to ride, shoot, and kill without hesitation. Each warrior carried multiple bows, each one designed for distance, speed, and precision. They could hit a target while galloping at full speed, and then vanish into the horizon before the enemy even regrouped. Their strategy was genius in its simplicity. They attacked with storms of arrows, then pretended to flee, drawing the enemy into the open. When their enemies broke formation to chase them, that's when the trap closed. From every direction came the thunder of hooves, the Mongols surrounding, crushing, and annihilating. They called it the feigned retreat. But it was more than a tactic. It was psychological warfare. Genghis understood the human mind better than any philosopher or priest. He knew panic spreads faster than arrows, and once it begins, it devours armies from within. But this wasn't just a horde. This was organization, precision, and communication. Every soldier carried a small flag to signal commands. Messengers on horseback could deliver orders hundreds of miles in a single day. If one general fell, another instantly took his place. There was no confusion, no hesitation, no mercy. They didn't fight for land, they fought for dominance, for control. When a city surrendered, it was spared. When it resisted, it was erased from the earth. That choice, submission or extinction, spread faster than any sword. And soon, entire nations surrendered before the first arrow was even fired. The Mongol army became the most feared force the world had ever seen. A storm of discipline and terror, a war machine that could move faster, strike harder, and disappear quicker than any empire before it. It wasn't just an army, it was a system of fear, forged by one man's vision of absolute control. The Mongols didn't just conquer with weapons, they conquered with fear. It was their greatest invention, more powerful than any sword or arrow. When a city resisted, they didn't just win, they erased it, brick by brick, body by body, until nothing remained but silence. Then they left behind a few survivors to spread the story. Those stories traveled faster than any messenger. They turned entire kingdoms into trembling children, and when the Mongols came knocking, gates opened on their own. In 1219, they attacked the Khwarezm Empire, a mighty kingdom stretching across Persia and Central Asia. Its ruler, proud and arrogant, executed Genghis Khan's envoys, a fatal mistake. What followed was not war, it was punishment. City after city fell. Bukhara, Samarkand, Nishapur. Each one burned, each one drowned in blood. At Nishapur, after a Mongol general was killed, Genghis ordered vengeance so complete that even dogs and cats were slaughtered. When the soldiers were done, they built pyramids of skulls, monuments of terror, rising toward the black sky. In the Middle East, they stormed Baghdad, the jewel of the Islamic world, a city of knowledge and art. They turned it into ash. Rivers ran dark with ink from destroyed libraries and red with the blood of its people. One chronicler wrote, "The streets were so full of corpses that no one could walk without stepping on the dead." To the Mongols, this was not cruelty, it was efficiency. Fear saved time, terror replaced battles. Why fight an army when you can destroy their will to resist? They learned to use fear like a weapon of mass destruction. They let rumor do their work. When news spread that a city had defied Genghis Khan and was erased, the next one surrendered without a fight. And so their empire expanded faster than any in history, not through diplomacy, not through numbers, but through psychological domination. Even the most distant rulers began sending tribute to avoid his wrath. They had never seen him, but his legend was enough. By mastering fear, Genghis Khan discovered a terrifying truth. You don't need to conquer every city. You just need the world to believe that you can. Genghis Khan understood something no ruler before him ever did, that chaos could be orchestrated, that panic could be engineered, and that fear, once created, could spread faster than any army. He built not just an empire of warriors, but a network of information, deception, and control. His spies were everywhere. Long before his armies arrived, his scouts had already mapped the roads, counted the guards, measured the walls, and even identified the city's weak spots. They spread rumors, forged letters, and planted fear like seeds, waiting for it to bloom before the first arrow was loosed. When the Mongols struck, they already knew everything: where the generals slept, where the food was stored, where the people would run when they panicked. He turned chaos into a tool. One false retreat could destroy an entire army. When enemies saw the Mongols flee, they thought they'd won. But what they didn't know was that retreat was a trap, a perfect illusion designed to draw them into the open where thousands of hidden riders waited. It wasn't luck. It was psychological engineering centuries ahead of its time. Even discipline served his grand design. If one soldier disobeyed orders, his entire unit was executed. If one general failed, his family paid the price. There was no room for weakness. And yet Genghis rewarded talent like no emperor before him. A peasant could become a commander. A captured foreigner could rise in rank if he proved useful. He didn't care about bloodlines, only results. To him, the world was a chessboard and men were pieces. The difference was, he never played for checkmate. He played to erase the board itself. This was the mind of Genghis Khan, not just a warrior, but a scientist of fear, an architect of chaos, and the first man in history to weaponize information like steel. By the time Genghis Khan died in 1227, the world had changed forever. What began as a handful of tribes had become the largest empire ever forged by man. From the frozen plains of Siberia to the burning deserts of Persia, from the walls of China to the gates of Eastern Europe, one banner cast its shadow over them all. The banner of the great Khan. His successors, Ogadai, Mongke, and later Kublai Khan, carried his fire even further. They invaded Russia, Persia, Korea, the Middle East, and almost Japan. Their armies crossed frozen rivers, mountains, and seas, as if geography itself no longer mattered. In their path, nations that had stood for centuries simply vanished, cities burned, libraries turned to dust, kingdoms that once shaped history were now just whispers in the wind. And yet, for the Mongols, this wasn't destruction, it was order, the world being reshaped by destiny. At its height, the Mongol Empire ruled over more than 100 million people, stretching from the Pacific Ocean to the borders of Europe. No empire before or after ever controlled so much land, so fast. The Silk Road flourished under their rule. Trade between East and West became possible again. But the roads were paved with bones. In China, the Jin dynasty fell. In Persia, entire cities were erased. In Europe, even kings trembled at the rumor of approaching hooves. It's said that in some lands, when mothers tried to quiet crying children, they would whisper, "Hush, or the Mongols will come." The world was on fire, and for a brief, terrifying moment, it belonged entirely to one idea, that fear, when mastered, can rule the earth. But all fires burn out, even the greatest. And as the empire reached its peak, the cracks were already beginning to show. Every empire rises with a dream and falls by the same hand that built it. The Mongol Empire was no exception. After the death of Genghis Khan, his sons and grandsons inherited not just his land, but his ambition and his pride. And pride, more than any enemy, began to eat the empire from within. What Genghis had united through discipline, his heirs divided through greed. They fought over borders, titles, and legacy. Each one believed he was destined to rule the world. Each one thought he was the true heir of the great Khan. The unity that once made them unstoppable began to fade. The machine that had conquered half the earth started to fracture. East turned against West, brother against brother. Generals became kings, kings became traitors. The empire, once guided by a single vision, became a collection of rival states, each one calling itself the true Mongol Empire, while destroying what little remained of the old one. The discipline that had been their strength was replaced by luxury, corruption, and politics. The warriors who once lived on horseback now lived in palaces. The hunters had become the hunted. And beyond their walls, the world they once ruled began to rebuild. China rose again. Persia recovered. New powers grew in the west. The storm was over, and all that remained of the Mongols was the echo of thunder. They had conquered faster than anyone in history, and disappeared just as fast. In less than 2 centuries, the greatest empire the world had ever seen was reduced to scattered memories, a shadow of fear lingering in the corners of history. The cost of empire was everything, its glory, its unity, its soul. Long after the last Mongol horseman vanished into the dust, the world they built and destroyed continued to shape humanity. Their empire had redrawn the map of civilization. For the first time, Europe and Asia were connected under a single system of trade and communication. The Silk Road thrived again, guarded by Mongol patrols. Goods, ideas, and inventions flowed freely between continents. Paper, gunpowder, the compass, the tools that would shape the modern world, all traveled under the shadow of their rule. Even their laws left a mark. The code of Genghis Khan, known as the Yasa, demanded order, loyalty, and equality before command. It punished theft and betrayal harshly, but it also protected religious freedom, something rare in that age. The Mongols had no single religion. They didn't force their gods upon others. They believed power itself was divine. And in their strange way, they built a world more connected, more global than any before it. But history remembers them differently. Not as builders, but as destroyers. Not as diplomats, but as demons on horseback. And perhaps that is fair, because every gift they left behind was paid for in blood. Genghis Khan united more land in 25 years than Rome did in 400. He turned tribes into nations, fear into law, and chaos into empire. But he also showed the world a truth that still burns today. Power without mercy always consumes itself. Empires rise, empires fall, and in the end, all that remains are the stories. Stories of men who tried to rule the earth and learned that no one rules forever. Because the real empire is fear, and fear never dies.